Welcome to today's new lecture on the web-based decision support systems for management. And as we have gone through the initial lectures of the details of decision support system, now we are trying to get into the decision process, and then we will look into each components of the decision support system. So, without further delay, let us get to today's topic. So, we are going to discuss today what is called as the decision process. Okay. And I am Dr. Deepa Philip, and I am from IIT Kanpur. So, first today we will talk about the type of decisions that the three major type of decisions that we will be dealing with as part of the decision support system. And the rule is that with respect to DSS, okay, our discussions are all about the how all this is relevant to decision support system. So, the three major type of decisions that we need to talk about is, the first one is the independent. I kind of mentioned this earlier briefly, but the idea here of an independent decision is the decision maker, whether it is a he or a she, has full responsibility. Okay. The responsibility of the decision lies with the decision maker in complete sense, and okay, there is one more thing as part of that, and authority, okay, to make a complete decision, complete and implementable decision, also rest with the decision maker. Okay, this is decision maker. So, the decision maker has full responsibility. Okay. The total responsibility of the decision is with the decision maker, and also authority. The decision maker has authority, or it becomes his responsibility and authority to make the complete and implementable decision. The decision has to be complete, and it also has to be implementable, okay, that you can implement it in the organization. And this is the most prominent form in business. Okay. In business, most of the time this independent decision is the most prominent form of decision making. Then comes the second one, the second decision. This is, we call it as sequential interdependent. Okay. They are not really independent, they are sequential interdependent. So, the logic here is that the decision maker, whether it is a he or a she, decision maker makes a part of the decision, okay, a part of a decision, makes a part of a decision, okay, this is the critical word, decision, and then passes it on to someone else. Okay. So, it is in the, it is kind of in a chain. So, you make a decision. So, it is like you can think about as decision 1, decision 2, decision 3, etc. like this. And let us say the person whom we are talking about is making the decision 2. So, somebody else made the decision, passed on to decision 2, you make the decision and then pass on to decision 3, somebody else will make the rest of the decision, and this chain continues. Okay. And this is the next prominent form. Okay. This is the next prominent form in business. Okay. After the independent, then sequential interdependent is the one. Then comes the third one, we call it as pooled, okay, interdependent. Okay, pooled interdependent decision, right. So, the first one is independent, then sequential interdependent, then comes the pooled interdependent, where the decision must result from negotiation and interaction. Negotiation and interaction among decision makers. Okay. The critical word is negotiation and interaction. Okay. So, most of the time this type of decision, okay, is what we also call as committee decisions. Okay. So, the way to think about it is you have a round table and you have people sitting around the table or the decision makers sitting around the table, and they negotiate, okay, etc. like this. Okay. They negotiate and interact among them each other and then make the decision. Okay. Lot of the time the pooled interdependent, this kind of decisions are also known as mostly not very efficient due to compromises. Okay. In a committee kind of a setup, you have to make compromises, you have to talk to people, you have to make amendments, you might have to agree with somebody else's vision, thought process, etc. So, hence you may not make the best decision, you might make a compromise decision. So, what does DSS should do? Okay. The important thing is the DSS should be capable of supporting. So, the capability of the DSS should be supporting and facilitating all the three decision making styles, okay, or types. It should support that any whatever be the decision support system, it should be capable of supporting, it should support and facilitate, okay, to make independent decisions, sequential interdependent decisions and pooled interdependent decisions. Only then you can call it as the decision support system is basically supports all sort of business decision functions. Okay. Now, we talk about the phases of decision. Okay. If you look into this, then we are going to look at the slide, we are going to talk about the phases of decisions, and same way we talked about the type of decision, we have three main phases of decision. Okay. In this case, we are going to talk about the three main phases of the decision. And so, the first phase is what we talk about it as the intelligence. Okay. Intelligence is the phase 1. Here what we call as raw data is obtained. Okay. You are obtaining the raw data, okay. Then you are processing it, processed and examined, okay, for clues or hints or indicators that may identify the problem. Okay. So, we take the raw data, you collect the raw data, then you process and examine it, and why are you examining it? You are looking for clues or hints or indicators that may help you to identify the problem. Okay. So, typically there is people have this kind of a question where usually there is something called as this analytics word, and there is something also known as data mining, right. I just wanted to talk about this here just quickly, because we may use this word in different context in our decision support system. So, data mining has been like it has been there for a long time, and when you look into data for patterns or signs, etc. Okay. When you take the data and you are just looking into identify patterns and stuff like that, then that is typically what you call as data mining. So, you have no specific thing in mind, you are just basically looking into it. Whereas, in analytics, we use data to answer a specific question or hypothesis. You have some specific question in your mind and you are looking into data to answer that question, whether it is right or wrong. So, that becomes analytics. Okay. So, we will be distinguishing this analytics and data mining in the decision support system. Okay. So, the first phase of it is intelligence, then comes the second phase, we call that as design. Okay. So, that is inventing, you are inventing, developing and analyzing possible course of actions. Okay. You develop your own approach, invent your own approach, or you may develop your own approach, or you may analyze data and come up with a new potpourri of approaches. So, that is what second phase of the design. So, this has two important aspects you need to think about. Okay. So, number one is it involves processes to understand the problem, Okay. First part is that, then generate solutions and test solutions for feasibility. Test those solutions for feasibility. Okay. So, that is the first part. Okay. It involves various processes that helps you to understand the problem, generate the solution and test the solutions for feasibility. Second part is choice. Okay. Once you generate solutions, the next part is choice. You have to make a choice, which is the selecting a particular course of action, from those available. Okay. So, you have generated various solutions. From those available solutions, you identify a particular course of action, you make a choice. This is what I am going to do as part of it, right. So, this usually, in my opinion, we also call the choice as the third part of it, okay, of the system. Okay. Once you generate the solution, so it is like you gain intelligence, okay, then you do is design solution and then choose alternative. Okay. So, this is kind of sometimes that people do, but what happens is DSS should support all phases of decision making. Okay. It should support all these three phases. Okay. Three phases. Okay. That is the phases of decision as part of it. Okay. So, now we have looked into what we call as the types of decision. We talked into the three phases of decision. Now, let us talk about the decision making and management. Okay. If you look into the slides, these are some of the key words that we will define for this from the DSS angle. Okay. There are many other definitions available, but we are defining it from the DSS standpoint. So, the first phrase we are going to define as part of it is the management. What is management? There are so many definitions, but for us the working definition is processes by which organizations, okay, these are the processes by which organizational goals are achieved through the use of resources. Okay. For us in this course, how do you achieve organizational goals? Okay. You are achieving organizational goals through the use of resources. And how do you use the resources? There are set processes by which it allows you to use the resources. Okay. So, what are these resources? So, you can think about it as for manpower, materials, okay, money, okay, methods or processes. Okay. So, then you can think about it as space, time, energy, etc. Okay. These are all resources, and why are they resources? They involve, okay, they are considered as resources because of their ability to become inputs and attaining organizational goals. Okay, goals are considered as output of the process Okay. So, one way to think about it is you have a, for the time being, I am just going to draw a black box and I am just going to call it as transformation process. Okay. It is a process, a black box, okay, and you have inputs to it, okay, and you have outputs. Okay. Output. Okay. Output, we call it as an organizational goal, and sometimes from the output to the input we tend to have what we call as a feedback. Okay. So, in this case the inputs tend to be man, materials, money, space, time, energy, etc. Okay. These all becomes input to this process. Okay. And then the output, many a times we can broadly summarize it into two. We can think about it as products or services. Okay. So, if you talk about Maruti Suzuki, then their organization goal is to make cars. Okay. So, the product will be, it will be a car as a tangible product. Or if you talk to Infosys as a software company, they will be providing software services. So, they will be doing this. So, in a products, when you have tangible products, this transformation process, sometimes people call it as manufacturing. When you have like a service or a something like that Infosys, then the transformation process is called as operations. Okay, in this regard. So, the resources are the critical part that actually goes into the processes as inputs. Okay. So, then how do you measure? The third one is how do you measure success? Okay. Most of the time you measure success by a term called productivity. Okay. Productivity is the ratio of output over input. Okay. So, now how many ways you can improve productivity? Okay. So, the question is how can you improve productivity? How can you increase productivity? Okay. There are 5 ways ideally you can think about doing it. Okay. So, if you call productivity is P, if you want to increase it, then the option in front of you is, first option is output over input. So, you increase the output, decrease the input, this is one option. Or second option is you have an output, you have an input, right. You maintain the same output, reduce the input, this is another way of increasing the productivity. The third option is again this is a ratio. Okay. You maintain the same level of input while increasing the output, this is the third option. Then the fourth option is you can slightly increase the input, but at the same time for that slight increase the output much drastically, then you can increase the output. And then the last option is reverse of this, which is Okay. Slightly decrease the output, very little decrease in output, but large decrease in input due for that. So, in these 5 ways, if you think about it, you can increase the productivity of the system. So, the management is all about how do we achieve these organizational goals through appropriate use of the resources is what we talk about. Okay. I hope you guys understand that these terms, even they are defined in many other ways, but for our course this is how we will define it. Okay. I hope you guys understand this. So, we will continue to the next slide. Now, we talk about what we call as the decision making process, if you look into this slide. Okay. And the decision making process is the first step of this is define the problem. Okay. So, what does it entails to? For us, when somebody says what is define the problem, it means it is a situation. What is a problem? The situation that may deal with some difficulty or an opportunity in the organization. Okay. You are either looking at dealing with some difficulty or an opportunity in an organization. So, once you find that there is some difficulty or there is an opportunity, then you want to exploit that. Okay. And then you want to use in that this way point, then once you identify this, you want to use inputs to achieve organizational goal. So, if you are producing cars, produce better cars, more cars, make more money. If you are doing services, provide better services, provide service to more people, make more money, that kind of a thing. Okay. So, once you identify this problem, then comes is develop the model. So, what does this develop the model means? Okay. It is typically it describes the decision problem, it describes the decision problem within the real world scenario. Okay. So, whatever is the current situation, okay, or the organizational situation that you see, within that context, can you describe the decision problem? That is what developing the model means. Okay. Or another way to think about it is, model in our class or for this course, we call it as model is an abstraction of the real system. Okay. So, what are you abstracting? What are we abstracting? Okay. Details that are relevant are considered and irrelevant details are ignored. Okay. So, you may want to, let us say if you have a to make a decision of where to place, let us say there is a factory in which we will take an example here. This is a factory building and this wall is painted green, let us say this wall is painted blue, this is painted white and this is painted black. Let us say just I am giving you as an example, right, and you want to decide. So, this place there is machine flooring and this is another place where you have machine flooring. Okay. This is a machine floor. If you have to place a very heavy machine, you may not look at what is the color of the wall. You may decide where you have machine flooring and you will decide whether to place in this machine floor 1 or machine floor 2, because the machine has heavy weight and you do not want the floor to break. So, when you are abstracting this, you would only abstract at the details of the square footage of the machine floor and where the machine floor is located, and where if you place this machine, you can still save a considerable amount of machine floor. You will find that place and put the machine. You may not look into what you call as the color of the wall at that time. So, that is what the abstraction. So, the color of the wall is abstracted out and the rest of the details are maintained. Then comes identify possible solution, the decision making process, the third step. So, what does it entails to? Okay. So, when you say identify possible solution, okay, I would like to use the word, whenever this is, use the word alternatives. Okay. There is not just business, typically there is not one, there are many alternatives available. Okay. So, consider these alternatives, you are considering these alternatives and evaluate them to identify the best fit at that time. Okay. So, the importance is you are making decision in present, okay, taking decision today. So, you analyze and decide which is the best fit within that time period, okay, at the current time, and you make the decision at the current time. So, the word I am using is best fit. I am not saying the best or the optimal. You may not be able to make the optimal decision, but whatever data you have, you decide to make the best fit at this time period. Okay. Then comes the compare the solutions. Okay. The last part. Okay. So, compare the solutions is quantification of best fit in one way to think about it. Okay. Or another way to think about it is, what we talk about it is, what do we do here? Choose and recommend. Okay. We are making a choice and we are making a recommendation. Okay. Recommend the best fit solution, the best fit solution to the problem. Okay. Okay. So, at this point here you are finding a way to calculate or quantify best fit. In the previous step, you are finding a way, you are coming up with equations or whatever it is to quantify the best fit. In this case, you do the quantification process, and from then you make the choice and recommendation for the best fit solution to that particular problem. Okay. Hopefully, this also makes sense to you. So, we now move to the type of decisions that are to be supported by the decision support system. If you look into the slides, okay, this is, I would say, part 1, but again from the DSS standpoint. Okay. We are looking it from a decision support system standpoint, not from the general sense. There is a lot of other things you can talk about it, but for us we talk about the first one is the structured problem. If you look into it, we have mentioned this in another way, okay, and I had given a brief definition. So, for us in this course, for the rest of the course, we call it as routine problems. Okay. They are very routine problems for which standard solution methods exist. Solution method exists. Okay. So, here two parts aspects to this. Okay. The approach to obtain the best solution, is known. Okay. You know the approach, how to obtain the best solution, and second one is objectives are clearly defined, Okay. We know what to do. So, let us say for example, you have 4 jobs. Okay. Example in this case is 4 jobs. Okay. We call it as J1, J2, J3, J4, and you have one machine. Okay. And each job has its processing time and due date, okay, or promised delivery date, and the processing time, let us call it as 10, 6, 15, 20, 1, these are in hours, and the promised delivery date, the due date of this one is 65/9/48/35. Okay. So, which means the job 1 will take 10 hours to process, okay, and it is due, we have to deliver that in next 65 hours. Job 2 takes 6 hours to process and you have 9 hours to deliver it. Job 3 takes 15 hours to process and 48 hours to deliver it. Job 4 takes 21 hours to process and 35 hours to deliver it. So, now which job should be done when? That is a standard question that lot of the people do. This is called as sequencing and scheduling. So, you can talk about earliest due date, and there is kind of standard approaches by which you can say, okay, I want to deliver the job in such a way that none of the jobs are late. So, the objective is clearly defined and the approach to find the best solution given the condition is also known to you. Take the job which has the earliest due date and keep on processing them at the so that you have minimized the due dates. Okay. So, this kind of problems, okay, they are also lot of the time they are, okay, the decision making process is relatively less complicated. Okay. It is reasonably easy, I do not want to call it easy, but it is less complicated. Okay. Now, we will go to the second part of them which we call as unstructured problem. Okay. So, these kind of problems, they are complex and fuzzy problems. They are complex and fuzzy problems for which no clear cut, I will use the word clear cut here, no clear cut solution methods exist. Okay. So, these problems are complex, number 1, and fuzzy. Fuzzy in another way you can think about as not clearly defined. Okay. I use the word, it is not fuzzy logic, it is they are not clearly defined at this point, okay, and they have no clear cut solution methods exist. Okay. So, the number 1 aspect of this is there is an absence of structured phase in decision problem. Okay. There is an absence of structured phase that causes this problem to be not clearly defined. Okay. And second one is mostly solved using human intuition. So, your decision maker's intuition or what we call as past experience, okay, or we can think about it as or maybe training, etc. Okay. These all comes into handy when you try to solve this kind of unstructured problems. Okay. And unstructured problems are like a classic example, a simple example of this is, okay, solving a crime scene, solving a crime. Okay. Each crime is a separate problem and the police or the detective does not know who committed the crime, looks for clues, identify the clues, his prior experience, training, previous lessons learned from solving similar crimes, etc., comes into picture, his hunch, intuition, etc., comes into picture, observations comes into picture. From there he creates what he calls a mental model, or this is what might have happened, and from there then of this is what has happened, this might be the guy, or this might be the this is the type of crime and who are the people who do the crime, look for other clues, and so sometimes you may catch the criminal, sometimes you may not catch the criminal. So, and so let us say you try to solve a theft today, or the person solves a theft today successfully, does not mean that another theft tomorrow will be solved successfully, because each time one theft is completely different from the other theft and it will have its own fuzzy elements to it. Fuzzy again is not the fuzzy logic, it is more about the not very clearly defined part of it. Okay. Then we move to the next one, which is the decisions to be supported, again from the DSS viewpoint. Okay. We are talking everything from the DSS viewpoint. I am reminding you of the DSS viewpoint purely because of the fact that critical for us. And the third type is what we call a semi-structured problem. Okay. So, this is an interesting thing, okay, and sometimes lot of the time people are happy in business to come across semi-structured problems purely because these are decision problems. These are decision problems in which some but not all phases are structured. Okay. We went through the 3 phases of decision making, but some phases, okay, not all phases, some phases are structured. Okay. So, it allows you to do again 2 important points, allows decision maker to combine standard solution processes, okay, with human intuition. Okay. You are combining this, you have the capability to combine standard solution processes with that of the human intuition, because there is some structured phase and not all phases are structured. So, wherever the structured phase is there, so you use standard processes, and wherever there is unstructured, you use human intuition. Okay. The second part of it is optimal solutions. Okay. We will call it as the best or ideal. Okay. Optimal solutions are rarely possible. It is not that they are not available, but it is very rare, very rare that you would be able to get the optimal solution, right. So, then this kind of approach where you combine some standard solution process, okay, with human intuition. Okay. So, that says that heuristics, okay, that model human intuitions may exist for some of them. Yeah. Sometimes people say, oh, I can solve this problem by neural network or something. Possible. Some problems you may have a heuristic or way or a computer may be able to mimic how the human is making the decision and etc. But that does not mean that you are going to get the best fit or optimal solution for that particular problem. Okay. So, the idea logic here is that the DSS, it has to support the structured problem, which are reasonably simplistic in nature, less complicated, and then you have to support the unstructured problems, which are the most complex one in nature, and then there is the stuff in between, the semi structured problem, the intermediate. Okay. So, if you think about it, if you take x axis as complexity like this, okay, this is simple and to complex. Okay. You are moving towards complex, the complexity increases as you move to the right. So, then you have structured problems here, structured problems. I have enhanced it to this level because it may start with really simple to somewhat complex, and then you have really unstructured problems, the other end, okay, the extreme end. You have somewhere in between is what I call as the semi structured. Semi structured problems. Okay. So, this is how you can think about it. The easiest part is a structured problem, the complicated part is unstructured problem, and the intermediary is the semi structured problem. Okay. So, with this we come to the conclusion of this decision and the type of decision. We are not talking much about rational decisions and those kind of things, that we will talk when we come into the model based management systems and etc. But for the time being, from the background of the decision making and the decision support system, these are the major aspects of decision processes that we need to learn and understand as part of this course. Thank you very much for your patient hearing, and we will now look into the various components of decision support system. Thank you.